What happens when an archaeologist discovers something that should not exist? Deep within the Grand Canyon, Dr. Ethan Ward unearths an artifact that defies explanation, a metallic sphere covered in symbols that match no known human civilization. As the object begins to react to human touch, Ethan must confront a terrifying possibility. Either everything we know about human history is wrong, or we were never alone on this planet. As government agents close in and colleagues disappear, Ethan and linguist Helena Cruz follow the sphere's mysterious coordinates across the American Southwest. Each discovery pulls them deeper into danger, revealing a global network of sites that predate recorded history. The truth they're uncovering has been systematically erased from human memory for thousands of years, and someone is still working to keep it buried. What was found in that hidden chamber wasn't evidence of alien visitation. It was something far more disturbing, proof that we are not the first advanced civilization to walk this earth, and a haunting clue to what made the others vanish without a trace. The crack of stone giving way beneath his feet was Ethan Ward's only warning before the world disappeared. His body plummeted through darkness, the archaeologist's desperate grasp finding nothing but empty air as the Grand Canyon floor betrayed him. Time stretched impossibly thin during those 3 seconds of freefall, enough for his mind to form the thought, "This is how I die." His shoulder slammed against stone first, sending a white-hot burst of pain through his nervous system. The beam of his headlamp cartwheeled across ancient rock walls during his tumble, illuminating for a split second what his brain refused to comprehend. Symbols etched into the stone that matched nothing in his 20 years of archaeological experience. Not Native American, not Spanish colonial, not human. Ethan's body came to rest on cool sand, his breathing shallow and uneven. Blood pulsed at his temples with each heartbeat. He tasted copper in his mouth where he'd bitten his tongue. When he finally attempted to move, shards of glass seemed to shift under his skin. "Ward? Ward, you hear me?" Jacob's voice filtered down from the fissure 10 feet above, a distant echo against the absolute silence of the chamber. "Jesus Christ, man, say something!" "I'm alive," Ethan managed, each word scraping his dry throat. He fumbled for the backup flashlight in his vest pocket, hands trembling against the metal cylinder. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a space that shouldn't exist. The chamber was perfectly circular, its walls smooth where they shouldn't be, angular where nature would have made curves. The flashlight's glow caught dust particles suspended in the air, undisturbed for centuries until his violent arrival. "What happened? Can you climb back up?" Jacob called down. Ethan's response died in his throat as his light swept across the chamber's center. There, partially buried in the fine sand, lay a metallic sphere approximately the size of a basketball. Its surface was tarnished with age, yet it reflected his light with an intensity that made his eyes water. "I need to document this," he whispered to himself, reaching for his camera with hands that wouldn't steady. "I need more light. Ward, I'm calling for backup. Sit tight." Ethan barely registered Jacob's words. His universe had collapsed to this moment, this impossible chamber, this object that defied explanation. He approached it slowly, archaeologists' instincts fighting against a primal urge to flee. The symbols on the walls matched markings on the sphere, lines and curves that followed mathematical precision beyond anything he'd studied. When his fingers finally made contact with the metal, a sensation like static electricity danced up his arm. The surface was unexpectedly warm, as if the object retained heat despite the chamber's cool air. Ethan's pulse quickened, his throat constricting as he carefully brushed away the surrounding sand. The sphere wasn't sitting on the ground. It was embedded in a pedestal of the same material, covered in more of the intricate symbols. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with lines thin as human hair forming complex patterns that seemed to shift under his gaze. Some appeared to be star charts, others resembled topographical maps, but none matched any known human civilization. "This isn't possible," he murmured, his academic mind racing through every indigenous culture that had inhabited the region. The ancestral Puebloans, the Hohokam, the Navajo, none had metallurgical skills remotely capable of producing something like this. Ethan's fingers traced a particular sequence of symbols that repeated around the sphere's equator. Each touch sent that same strange vibration through his fingertips, as if the object responded to human contact. In the beam of his flashlight, he could swear the markings had begun to emit a faint luminescence of their own. His phone buzzed in his pocket. No signal, but the camera still worked. With shaking hands, he began documenting everything, moving methodically despite the voice in his head screaming that he'd stumbled upon something world-changing, something that would rewrite human history, or perhaps not human at all. The thought settled in his stomach like ice water. Ethan had built his career debunking ancient alien theories, patiently explaining to wide-eyed students how indigenous populations had accomplished architectural and artistic feats through ingenuity rather than extraterrestrial intervention. He'd published papers refuting pseudo-archaeology, had appeared on television documentaries as the voice of scientific reason. Yet here, alone in the darkness, those certainties crumbled like the ground that had given way beneath him. The sphere seemed to pulse beneath his palm, the warmth intensifying. When he pulled his hand away, a residual tingling remained, spreading slowly up his arm. The sensation wasn't painful. It reminded him of the moment before sleep claims consciousness, that liminal space between waking and dreaming. "Ethan, rescue team's on the way." Jacob's voice seemed to come from another world. Ethan knew what would happen next. The National Park Service would secure the site. Government archaeologists would take over. The find would be classified, studied behind closed doors. He might never see this chamber again, never learn the truth about what he'd discovered. Before he could second-guess himself, he slipped his pack from his shoulders and removed a small sample collection kit. With precise movements born from years in the field, he collected sediment samples from around the sphere, carefully scraped microscopic particles from its surface into sterile containers, and photographed every angle of the object and chamber. As he worked, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. His breathing quickened, not from exertion but from a growing certainty that he stood at a crossroads, not just in his career, but in human understanding. When he finally sat back on his heels, a decision crystallized in his mind with terrifying clarity. Some discoveries changed the discoverer more than they changed the world. The sound of rescue equipment rattling above broke his reverie. With swift movements, he secured his samples and slipped them into a hidden compartment in his vest. A compartment meant for personal items, not archaeological treasures. What he was doing violated every professional ethic he'd upheld throughout his career. Yet as his fingers closed around the metal sphere, lifting it from its ancient resting place, Ethan knew he had crossed a line from which there was no return. The object was surprisingly light, its weight shifting subtly in his hands, as if its mass redistributed itself. In that moment, as the first ropes of the rescue team descended into the chamber, Ethan Ward made a choice that would unravel not only his life, but the very fabric of what humanity believed about its origins. The sphere seemed to respond to his decision, the symbols brightening almost imperceptibly against his palms. He had found something in the depths of the Grand Canyon that shouldn't exist, or perhaps it had found him. 3 days after the Grand Canyon incident, Ethan sat hunched over a steel examination table in his cramped laboratory at Phoenix State University. The overhead fluorescence cast harsh shadows across his unshaven face as he positioned the metallic sphere under specialized lighting. Sleep had become a stranger. The object demanded his complete attention with an urgency he couldn't explain. "You look terrible," said Helena Cruz, appearing in the doorway with 2 coffee cups. The linguist's dark eyes immediately fixed on the artifact. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" Ethan's fingers twitched. "No, not yet." Helena set his coffee down and studied him carefully. "That's unlike you. The Ethan Ward I know would have called a press conference by now." He didn't respond, instead adjusting the light to reveal more of the sphere's surface. Under magnification, what had appeared as simple lines revealed themselves as intricate patterns, thousands of microscopic engravings forming systems of connections. Some resembled constellations, others, when viewed from different angles, transformed into continental outlines. "This is beyond anything we've documented," Helena whispered, leaning closer. Her professional detachment slipped for a moment. "These aren't random. There's syntax here, mathematical precision." "I know." Ethan pulled up digital scans on his monitor. Carbon dating is inconclusive. The metal doesn't match any known alloy from pre-Columbian America, not even close. Helena's finger traced a pattern of symbols without touching the surface. These repeat in perfect geometric progression. If it's language, it follows rules we haven't encountered before. She straightened suddenly. You stole this, didn't you? From a federal archaeological site. The accusation hung between them. Ethan's shoulders tensed as he met her gaze. I protected it. The NPS would have locked it away in some warehouse. His voice dropped. You know what happens to discoveries that don't fit the established timeline. You've built your entire career fighting pseudoscience, and now you're hiding evidence. Helena's expression hardened. What aren't you telling me? Ethan hesitated, then reached for his tablet. The sphere reacts to touch. Watch. He pulled up a thermal imaging video showing his hand making contact with the artifact. The temperature reading spiked precisely where his fingers connected, spreading through the object like a neural response. That's impossible, Helena whispered. So is its composition. Ethan pulled up another file. Preliminary spectroscopy shows elements we can't identify. Not just unusual combinations, elements not on our periodic table. Helena stepped back, professional caution reasserting itself. If what you're suggesting is true, I'm not suggesting anything yet. Ethan cut her off, but his eyes betrayed him, wide, almost feverish. But I know this doesn't belong in that canyon, at least not naturally. The linguist moved to the computer, pulling up high-resolution images of the symbols. These markings here, along what we're calling the equator, they repeat in sequences of 7. And these, she highlighted another section. They correspond to star patterns, but viewed from... She paused, her scientific mind rejecting the conclusion. From outside our atmosphere, Ethan finished quietly. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of equipment. Helena stared at the sphere, her academic skepticism battling with the evidence before her eyes. If we're right, she finally said, then someone mapped both Earth and the stars thousands of years before we had the technology to do either. Someone who understood mathematics, astronomy, and metallurgy at levels we've only reached in the modern era. Her voice dropped lower. Or someone who wasn't from here at all. Ethan watched her face, seeing his own conflict mirrored there, the scholar's need for verification warring with the human need to believe. We need to run more tests, he said, before anyone else sees this. If we're wrong, we're just two academics who made a mistake, but if we're right... He didn't finish the thought. Helena nodded slowly, her decision made. I'll cancel my classes tomorrow. She reached for the artifact, her fingers hovering just above its surface. What have you gotten us into, Ethan? The sphere seemed to pulse once beneath her shadow, as if acknowledging the question that neither of them was prepared to answer. The observatory at the edge of the Sonoran Desert stood like a sentinel against the night sky. Helena had called in a favor from an old colleague, gaining them after-hours access to the facility's advanced equipment. Now, at 2:17 a.m., she and Ethan worked in the dim glow of computer screens, the metallic sphere positioned on a specialized platform between them. The astronomy software is ready, Helena whispered, though they were alone in the vast dome. Something about their work demanded silence, as if they were trespassing not just in the building but in knowledge itself. Ethan nodded, his fingers moving across the keyboard. The high-resolution scans of the sphere's engravings appeared on the main screen, the strange symbols hovering like ghosts in the digital space. Now we overlay the star mapping program. Helena's voice was clinical, professional, a shield against the implications of what they were attempting. She initiated the sequence that would compare the sphere's markings against known celestial patterns. The computer hummed, processing the data. Both researchers held their breath as the program began matching points on the sphere to stars in the database. Lines formed between them, creating constellations, some familiar, others not. But it was the perspective that made Helena's hands tremble slightly on the console. These star charts... Ethan leaned forward, his face illuminated by the blue light of the monitor. They're accurate, but they're not viewed from Earth's surface. Helena nodded, her scientific skepticism crumbling beneath the weight of evidence. The perspective is from outside our atmosphere, possibly from orbit. She zoomed in on one section. These connecting lines form travel vectors, trajectories. Between what and where? Ethan's voice had taken on a hollow quality. The answer came as the program completed its analysis. Their three-dimensional model rotated on screen, a perfect match between the sphere's etchings and star patterns, visible only from space, connected by lines that converged at specific points on Earth. My God! Helena's professional veneer cracked. It's a navigation system, connecting celestial positions to terrestrial locations. Ethan stared at the model, transfixed. Show me the terrestrial points. Helena's fingers moved across the keyboard, and a globe appeared alongside the star map. Points of light glowed at specific coordinates: the Nazca lines in Peru, the Great Pyramid at Giza, the ancient city of Teotihuacan in Mexico, temple complexes in Cambodia and Indonesia, and now their discovery site in the Grand Canyon. These locations span continents, cultures, millennia. Ethan's voice had dropped to a whisper. Some of them weren't even built at the same time. Unless our timeline is wrong. Helena wouldn't look at him as she said it, focusing instead on the screen. Or unless someone was observing Earth long enough to see all of these locations across different periods. The implication hung in the air between them. Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes, feeling the burn of sleeplessness. When he looked up, his face had hardened with a scientist's determination. We need to check these other locations, see if there are more artifacts. That would require resources we don't have, international permissions, funding. Helena finally turned to him, the blue light catching the hollows under her eyes, and explaining where we got this information. Ethan's jaw tightened. We could start with the canyon site, go back, document everything properly. And return the artifact you stole? Helena's question carried no judgment, just practicality. I didn't. He stopped himself. Yes. Eventually. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft beeping of the computer as it continued to map connections between stars and Earth. The lines formed a web across the planet, as if something, or someone, had been traveling between these points. We need to be careful, Ethan. Helena's voice had softened. Whatever this is, others will want it. And not just for scientific knowledge. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen where thousands of years of human history were being rewritten by lines of light. The sphere sat between them, no longer just an archaeological curiosity, but a key to questions humanity had asked since it first looked up at the stars. Tomorrow, he said, we go back to the canyon. Neither spoke of the fear that had lodged in their chests, the terrifying possibility that they weren't uncovering humanity's past, but something else entirely. Something that had been watching, mapping, and perhaps waiting. The wind-carved sandstone of Canyon de Chelly rose against the morning sky like ancient sentinels as Ethan's truck bounced along the reservation road. Neither he nor Helena had spoken much during the 3-hour drive from Flagstaff. The sphere sat between them in a specialized containment case, its presence a gravitational force pulling at their thoughts. The elder's name is Yazzie Bigay, Ethan said, breaking the silence. 86 years old, traditional knowledge keeper. If anyone understands the historical context of what we found, it's him. Helena's fingers tapped nervously against her notepad. And you trust him not to report us? The Navajo have their own complicated relationship with the federal government. Ethan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Besides, we're not exactly showing him stolen artifacts, just consulting on historical narratives. The lie hung between them, as substantial as the sphere itself. They arrived at a modest home set against the red landscape, its windows reflecting the harsh sunlight. An elderly man waited on the porch, his weathered face impassive as they approached. No introductions were necessary. In small communities, visitors were expected. Dr. Ward. Yazzie Bigay's voice was steady, his English perfect but deliberate. Your message said you had questions about old stories. Ethan nodded, suddenly aware of how absurd their quest would sound. Thank you for seeing us. This is Dr. Helena Cruz, linguistics. The old man studied Helena, then gestured toward the house. Come in. Inside, the home was cool and sparsely furnished. Photographs of family members lined the walls. 4 generations captured in fading prints. Yazzie sat in a worn armchair, his hands resting on his knees, with the stillness of someone accustomed to patience. "You found something?" he stated rather than asked. Helena glanced at Ethan, who hesitated before placing the case on the table. "Yes, in a chamber beneath the Grand Canyon rim. We were hoping you might have heard stories." He opened the case. The sphere caught the light filtering through the curtains, its patterns seeming to shift subtly. Yazzie leaned forward, his expression unchanging, but his eyes, sharp and analytical, narrowed slightly. "Show me the markings more clearly," he said. Helena activated her tablet, displaying enhanced images of the sphere's engravings. Yazzie studied them in silence, his breathing the only sound in the room. When he finally spoke, his voice had lowered. "There are stories, not for tourists. Stories of those who came from above." He tapped one symbol sequence with a finger that didn't quite touch the screen. "This resembles what my grandfather called sky roads." Ethan leaned forward. "Sky roads?" Yazzie's expression remained neutral, but something in his posture changed, a withdrawal, a caution. "Paths between stars. The old ones told of visitors who walked among us. Not gods or spirits, people but different. They came, learned our ways, shared knowledge, then disappeared. Some said they returned to the sky. Others believed they went inside the earth." Helena's recorder captured every word, but her eyes never left the elder's face. "These visitors, did they leave anything behind?" "Knowledge, warnings." Yazzie's gaze moved from the tablet to the sphere itself. "Maps to places that should remain hidden." Ethan felt a chill despite the room's warmth. "Hidden why?" "Some doors are meant to stay closed." The old man's fingers traced a pattern in the air above the sphere. "This is not the first such object found. During my grandfather's time, government men came, asked questions, took things away." Helena exchanged a glance with Ethan. "When exactly?" 1947 summer." Yazzie's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes had taken on a distant quality. "They spoke of crashed aircraft, but my grandfather recognized the symbols they showed him, the same as these." Ethan's throat tightened. "Roswell." "A distraction," Yazzie said flatly. "What they truly sought was older, much older." The room fell silent. Outside, wind whistled through the canyon, a sound like something calling from a great distance. "Mr. Begay," Helena said carefully, "the markings match star patterns visible only from space, and they connect to specific locations around the world, ancient sites separated by thousands of miles and years. What does that suggest to you?" The old man studied her, then Ethan, measuring them with eyes that had seen nearly a century pass. "It suggests you are asking questions with dangerous answers, Dr. Cruz." He stood slowly, moving to a bookshelf where he retrieved a faded photograph. He placed it before them, a black and white image of a cave wall covered in petroglyphs. Among the familiar Navajo symbols were unmistakable patterns matching those on the sphere. "Near Black Mesa, 1925, photographed by my grandfather before the military restricted the area." Yazzie's voice had hardened. "You should return what you've taken, Doctor Ward. Not to your government, to the Earth." As they drove away, the sphere between them seemed heavier than before. Helena stared at her notes, her scientific certainty cracking around the edges. "What if it's not extraterrestrial?" she finally asked. "What if it's something else entirely?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Like what?" "Like evidence that everything we think we know about human history is wrong." The Arizona State Museum's basement laboratory felt different when Helena entered on Monday morning. Nothing had physically changed. The fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead. The climate control still maintained its precise 68 degrees. But something in the atmosphere had shifted. Her colleague's eyes lingered a moment too long. Conversations stopped when she approached. She found Marcus, her research assistant, hunched over a computer terminal, deleting files. "What are you doing?" Her voice came out sharper than intended. Marcus flinched. "Dr. Ramirez asked for the spectrometry data from last week." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Said you approved it." "I didn't." Helena moved closer to the screen. Those were her files, preliminary analyses of the sphere's composition. Where is Dr. Ramirez now? Meeting with the director. Marcus finally looked up, his expression strained. They've been asking about you and Dr. Ward, about your side project. Helena's pulse quickened. What exactly did they ask? If you'd discovered anything unusual in the Grand Canyon site, if you'd removed artifacts without documentation. His voice dropped. They already have the canyon chamber under federal jurisdiction. Military vehicles were there yesterday. Helena's phone vibrated in her pocket, Ethan calling again. She'd been avoiding him since their return from the reservation, needing time to process what they'd learned. Now she realized time had run out. Marcus, she said carefully, I need you to recover those files and transfer them to my secure drive. Then forget we had this conversation. The young man hesitated, fear and loyalty warring in his expression. Finally, he nodded. Helena slipped out, taking the back stairs to avoid the main corridor. In her office, she found someone had already been there, subtle signs only she would notice. The position of her chair, the angle of her reference books. The cabinet containing her field notebooks left unlocked. She didn't call security. Instead, she checked the hidden compartment beneath her desk, where she'd stored backup data. The drive was still there, untouched. Whoever had searched her office hadn't known what they were looking for. Her phone vibrated again. This time she answered. They know, Ethan said without preamble, his voice tight with tension. I just had a visit from 2 men claiming to be from the Department of Interior. They asked about artifacts removed from federal land. What did you tell them? Nothing useful. A pause. Helena, I don't think they're really from Interior. She closed her eyes, leaning against her desk. The director's been asking questions. Someone searched my office. We need to meet. Ethan's voice dropped lower. Not at the university. There's a diner on Highway 17, about 20 miles north of Phoenix. 1 hour. The line went dead. Helena gathered only what she absolutely needed. The backup drive, her personal notebook, a small bag she kept packed for fieldwork emergencies. As she headed for her car, she spotted Dr. Ramirez watching from his office window. His face betrayed nothing, but his eyes followed her movement across the parking lot. The diner was nearly empty when she arrived. Ethan sat in a back booth, a coffee cup untouched before him, the Sphere's containment case on the seat beside him. He looked haggard, his academic composure cracked by days of strain. I was followed from campus, he said as she slid into the booth. Lost them on the interstate, but they'll figure it out. Who are they? Helena kept her voice level, despite the fear crawling up her spine. I don't know exactly. Ethan's fingers drummed the table. But I spoke to the real Department of Interior this morning. They have no record of any investigation at the canyon site. Helena processed this. Someone's trying to contain this discovery. Why? I think we both know why. Ethan slid a newspaper across the table. It was folded to a small article. University professors missing after unauthorized excavation. Their names weren't mentioned, but the implication was clear. They're discrediting us before we can go public. Helena felt strangely calm now that her fears were confirmed. Establishing a narrative of rogue academics engaged in illegal activity. Ethan nodded. Classic disinformation strategy. I've seen it before with colleagues who pushed controversial theories. His eyes hardened. But this isn't theory. This is evidence. Helena stared at the containment case. What's our next move? Monument Valley. Ethan lowered his voice further. One of the coordinates from the sphere. If we find something there that connects, we'll have proof of a pattern too significant to dismiss. As they left the diner, Helena noticed a black SUV pulling into the lot, its windows tinted beyond legal limits. She didn't point it out to Ethan. They both knew they'd crossed a threshold, from academics seeking knowledge to fugitives protecting a truth someone wanted buried. In the parking lot, she found a note tucked beneath her windshield wiper. 2 words in typed font. Stop looking. She slipped it into her pocket without showing Ethan, a small deception that surprised her. The sphere's discovery had changed them both, eroding not just their professional ethics but the trust between them. What else wasn't he telling her? What wasn't she telling him? As they drove separate cars toward Monument Valley, Helena realized the greatest danger might not be external. The sphere wasn't just challenging human history, it was challenging everything they thought they knew about themselves. Monument Valley emerged from the desert haze like a mirage, its iconic sandstone sentinels burning crimson under the setting sun. Ethan parked his rental car beside a rocky outcropping, away from tourist viewpoints and ranger stations. Helena's vehicle pulled in beside his, dust settling on its windshield in a thin, rust-colored veil. Neither spoke as they retrieved their equipment. After 3 days of careful travel, switching vehicles, avoiding surveillance, sleeping in shifts, conversation had distilled to essentials only. The sphere, secured in its case, had become both talisman and curse. "The coordinates point here," Ethan said, checking the handheld GPS. "Within 50 meters of this position." Helena surveyed the landscape, shielding her eyes from the glare. "Not exactly inconspicuous for a dig." "We're not digging." Ethan removed ground-penetrating radar equipment from his pack. "Not yet." They worked methodically, sweeping the portable scanner across the area as the sun descended. The temperature dropped rapidly, desert heat bleeding into the darkening sky. By twilight, they had their answer. An anomaly beneath the surface, roughly circular, approximately 6 feet down. "Could be natural," Helena said, but her voice lacked conviction. Ethan marked the spot, then retreated to the vehicles where they could work without being silhouetted against the horizon. Under the dim glow of a covered flashlight, he spread out colonial-era Spanish maps he'd obtained from a private collector in Albuquerque. "Look at this." His finger traced a notation in faded ink near their location. 18th century Spanish expedition. They documented metal tools of unknown origin found buried in this region. Helena leaned closer. "What happened to them?" "That's the interesting part." Ethan turned the brittle page revealing expedition notes. The Spaniards reported members of their party disappearing after contact with the artifacts. Not killed, just gone. The remaining expedition members buried everything and marked the site as cursed. "Superstition," Helena said automatically, the skeptic in her asserting itself despite everything they'd discovered. "Maybe." Ethan's face looked hollow in the reflected light. But the Spanish were meticulous record keepers. These weren't religious zealots seeing devils. They were cartographers, naturalists. The wind picked up, whistling through the rock formations with a sound like distant voices. Helena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold in a way that had nothing to do with the desert night. "We can't excavate without proper equipment," she said, "and we can't exactly hire a crew." Ethan nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. "We document the anomaly, then come back prepared. If there's something down there connected to the sphere..." "It changes everything," Helena finished. She hesitated, then added, "Ethan, what's our end game here? Say we find incontrovertible evidence of whatever this is. What then?" The question hung between them, heavier than the sphere itself. Ethan stared at the distant mesas, now black cutouts against a star-filled sky. "I don't know anymore," he admitted, the words costing him visibly. "A week ago, I'd have said academic publication, peer review, reshaping our understanding of human history. Now we're fugitives chasing evidence that powerful people want buried." Helena's laugh held no humor. "Evidence that might not even be of human origin." Ethan's fingers drifted unconsciously to the case containing the sphere. "That's the question, isn't it? If not extraterrestrial, then what? A lost human civilization advanced beyond anything in our archaeological record, and if so, what happened to them?" Helena watched his hand on the case, noting how he seemed unaware of the gesture. The sphere had become an extension of him somehow, or he of it. A chill that had nothing to do with the desert night crawled up her spine. "There's something else we need to consider," she said carefully. "What if revealing this truth does more harm than good? What if there are legitimate reasons for keeping it hidden?" Ethan's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "You sound like them now." "I sound like someone considering all possibilities." Her voice remained steady despite the accusation, "including the possibility that we're in over our heads." The distance between them, physical, emotional, ideological, seemed to expand like the darkness around them. Ethan had changed since finding the sphere, his scientific caution eroded by obsession, or perhaps he was simply seeing clearly for the first time while she remained blinded by academic conservatism. "We've come too far to turn back," he said finally. "Whatever's buried here connects to what we found. The sphere is a key, Helena. We need to see what it unlocks." As they prepared to return to their vehicles, Helena noticed something etched into the rock face, geometric patterns, worn by centuries of wind, but unmistakably similar to the sphere's markings. Natural erosion couldn't explain the precision. Human hands couldn't have reached this high. Some questions, she was beginning to realize, came with answers too vast to comprehend. Some truths might be better left buried in the desert sand. The motel outside Gallup, New Mexico, reeked of cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. Helena sat cross-legged on the threadbare carpet, her laptop balanced precariously on a stack of books. 3 days of decryption work had left her eyes burning and her patience frayed. Across the room, Ethan paced like a caged animal, the sphere's case clutched under his arm like a football he refused to fumble. "It's done," she said finally, her voice rough from disuse. The algorithm finished compiling all data points from the sphere. Ethan stopped mid-pace, his expression sharpening with focus. "Show me." The laptop screen glowed with a 3-dimensional rendering, all the markings from the sphere plotted as interconnected data points. What had seemed like random etchings now formed a coherent system, a network of lines connecting specific geographical coordinates across the planet's surface. 37 points total, Helena said, zooming in on North America. "We've confirmed too the Grand Canyon Chamber and the Monument Valley site." Ethan leaned closer, his breath fogging the screen. "These aren't random locations. Look at the pattern. They form a grid." His finger traced lines between points. "It's a network." Helena nodded, rotating the model, "but not extraterrestrial in origin. I've cross-referenced the dating we managed before." She hesitated. "Before we left campus. These sites correspond to periods of known human habitation. The oldest dates back approximately 30,000 years. Pre-civilization," Ethan whispered. "Pre-recorded civilization," Helena corrected. "That's the point. These aren't alien landing sites, Ethan. They're evidence of an advanced human culture that existed alongside what we consider prehistoric societies." The revelation hung in the stale motel air. Ethan sank onto the bed, the springs protesting beneath his weight. "A parallel development? Impossible. We would have found evidence." "Would we?" Helena's voice took on an edge. "Our entire archaeological framework is built on assumptions about linear technological development. We classify anything that doesn't fit as anomalous, ceremonial, or misidentified." She gestured toward the sphere. "What if there were humans, just as human as us, who developed different technologies, different knowledge systems?" Ethan's eyes never left the screen. "And what happened to them?" Helena hesitated. "I have a theory. The dating of these sites shows a pattern of abandonment, moving from east to west across continents, spanning thousands of years. It's as if they were retreating from something. Or someone." Ethan's voice had dropped to a whisper, the implication settled between them. "Not alien visitors, but human competitors. 2 branches of humanity developing in parallel, one eventually eliminating the other so completely that only these hidden markers remained." "The sphere isn't a star map," Helena said finally. "It's a record, a history of their civilization's key locations, maybe even a warning." She scrolled through data points, each corresponding to sites where ancient megalithic structures stood, where unexplained technological anomalies had been discovered, where legends of civilizers or culture bringers persisted in indigenous oral histories. "They were us," Ethan said, the revelation rendering his voice hollow. "A different branch of humanity, more technologically advanced, but fewer in number, and we." He couldn't finish the thought. Helena closed the laptop, the room suddenly darker. History is written by the victors, or in this case not written at all. Outside, car headlights swept across the thin motel curtains. Neither moved. They'd been changing locations daily, paying cash using burner phones. So far they'd stayed ahead of whoever was pursuing them, but the net was tightening. Helena had spotted the same sedan twice in the past day. "If we're right," Ethan said. "This changes everything we know about human history. Not alien intervention, human achievement, erased by conflict and time. And covered up by those who found evidence before us." Helena's gaze drifted to the sphere. "Maybe to prevent us from learning what happened. Maybe to hide the fact that one branch of humanity eliminated another." The weight of the theory pressed down on them both. Not extraterrestrials, but forgotten ancestors, advanced, connected globally, and ultimately doomed. Their knowledge preserved only in these hidden markers, their existence reduced to myths of lost civilizations. "We need to go public," Ethan decided, his academic caution finally reasserting itself. "Proper channels, peer review, multiple verification, too big for one research team." Helena nodded slowly, but doubt clouded her eyes. "If they let us..." Whatever agency is after the sphere, they've been covering this up for decades, maybe longer. Yazzi's story about 1947, the Spanish colonial records, the sites themselves. Someone knows. Ethan stared at the sphere's case, his reflection distorted in its metallic surface. The object was never meant to be found, hidden in that sealed chamber, protected from discovery for thousands of years, until he had literally fallen into history's greatest secret. "Tomorrow," he said, "we head back to the university, face this directly." Helena didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried a resignation that hadn't been there before. "They'll never let this become public knowledge, Ethan. Some truths are too disruptive. Truth is what we do," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. They both understood, though neither would say it aloud. The sphere had never been about aliens. It had always been about us, about human history, about a genocide so complete it had been erased from collective memory. And some forgetting, perhaps, was intentional. The University of Arizona campus gleamed in the morning light, its buildings deceptively unchanged. Ethan and Helena approached from different directions, their plan meticulous, he with the sphere, she with the data backups. If one was intercepted, the other might succeed. Ethan felt the weight of watching eyes as he crossed the quad. Students streamed past, oblivious to the history literally carried under his arm. His office door was unlocked when he reached it, the first warning sign. Inside, two men in dark suits waited, their posture military despite the civilian clothes. "Dr. Ward," the older one said, not bothering to stand. "You've been difficult to find." Ethan remained in the doorway, fight-or-flight response activating. "Who are you?" "Department of Special Collections, Bureau of Land Management." The man smiled thinly. "Though that's not important. What matters is the federal property you removed from a protected archaeological site." "I was planning to return it," Ethan said, the lie falling flat in the sterile air. "Of course." The younger agent gestured to a chair. "Why don't we discuss the proper procedures for that?" Ethan didn't move. "I'd like to see identification." "You're not in a position to make requests, Doctor." The older man's smile vanished. "But let's be practical. You've made a significant discovery. We're here to ensure it's properly documented and preserved." "By erasing all record of its existence?" Ethan's grip tightened on the case. "By contextualizing it appropriately." The agent leaned forward. "You're not the first to find evidence of alternative historical narratives. Such discoveries require careful management." Ethan fought to keep his expression neutral. "You've known about this, about all of it. Certain branches of government maintain awareness of archaeological anomalies that could prove destabilizing to public understanding." The man's clinical tone made the admission more chilling. "We don't suppress knowledge, Dr. Ward. We contextualize it. By burying it." The younger agent sighed impatiently. "By preventing historical narratives from becoming political weapons. Imagine what certain groups would do with evidence that could rewrite human history. Religious extremists, ethno-nationalists, conspiracy theorists, each would twist your discovery to fit their agenda." Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket. Helena's signal. She'd reached the department server room. Their plan was proceeding even as he played for time. "What happens now?" he asked. "You surrender the artifact, sign non-disclosure agreements, and return to your academic career." The older agent spread his hands reasonably. "Your research will be appropriated under national security protocols. with generous compensation. In a few years, elements of your discovery may be gradually introduced into mainstream archaeology, properly framed, of course. And if I refuse? The man's expression didn't change. There is no scenario where this discovery becomes public in its raw form. The only variable is whether your career and freedom remain intact. In the silence that followed, Ethan weighed 2 decades of academic integrity against the truth he now carried. Outside his window, students walked between classes, their worldview uncomplicated by forgotten branches of humanity or government conspiracies. His phone buzzed again, Helena's second signal. The data had been uploaded to multiple secure servers. Even if they took the sphere, the information would survive. "I understand," Ethan said finally, setting the case on his desk. The older agent nodded, visibly relaxing. A wise decision. 3 hours later, Ethan stood alone at the Grand Canyon's edge, gazing into the chasm where everything had begun. The non-disclosure agreements lay signed in a government office. The sphere was gone, transported to some anonymous facility where it would join other artifacts too inconvenient for public knowledge. Helena had disappeared before the agents could find her, taking their research and vanishing into academic networks sympathetic to their cause. They had agreed not to contact each other. Her freedom depended on his ignorance of her whereabouts. The wind whipped around him, carrying dust from a land older than human memory. Somewhere below, the chamber remained, empty now, its secrets extracted. One small piece of a global puzzle that someone had decided humanity wasn't ready to solve. Ethan's phone contained one final message from Helena, sent through encrypted channels before she disappeared. They weren't from the stars. They were us. And they vanished. He deleted it after memorizing the words. As the sun set over the canyon, casting long shadows across geological time, Ethan understood that some silences were imposed not by history, but by those who controlled its narrative. The greatest cover-up wasn't about aliens or supernatural forces. It was about humans themselves, about paths not taken, about knowledge lost and found and hidden again. The truth remained buried, not in desert sands, but in plain sight, in anomalous artifacts dismissed by mainstream archaeology, in indigenous stories labeled as myths, in historical accounts catalogued as folklore. The evidence had always been there, fragmented across continents and cultures, waiting for someone to connect the patterns. Ethan turned away from the canyon, toward a world unchanged by what he now knew. He would return to teaching, to writing papers on conventional archaeology, to the comfortable certainties of established history. But he would remember what the sphere had revealed, that humanity's story was neither simple nor complete, and that some chapters had been deliberately erased from the collective narrative, not by extraterrestrials, but by humans themselves. Some truths, perhaps, were meant to stay buried, and some silences spoke volumes about what we feared to remember. As the sun sets on this tale of forgotten history and buried truths, we're left to wonder about the stories that lie beneath the official narratives we accept without question. What would you do if you discovered evidence that rewrote human history? Would you risk everything, your career, your safety, your very understanding of the world, to bring that truth to light? Or would you, like Ethan, ultimately accept that some revelations are too disruptive for the fragile constructs of modern society? The most profound mysteries aren't found in distant stars or supernatural realms, but in our own forgotten past, in the silences between historical records, in the artifacts that don't fit our timeline, in the stories dismissed as myths and legends. Perhaps the greatest archaeological discovery isn't a lost city or ancient treasure, but the humbling realization that humanity's journey has been neither linear nor simple, and that we may have forgotten more than we remember. If this story resonated with you, consider what other hidden histories might be waiting beneath the surface of our accepted truths. Share this journey with others who appreciate the deeper mysteries of our past, and join us for more explorations into the shadows of human knowledge. Follow our channel for weekly journeys into the unexplained, the forgotten, and the deliberately obscured corners of history. Like, share, and remember, the truth isn't always found in textbooks, but in the questions we dare to ask.